Presentation. Thank you all for coming this morning. For me, this is one of. All right, so everybody see the presentation? Yep, good. So this is obviously one of the most important topics for the country today, and how we're going to structure this discussion today is I'm going to sort of put a frame on it from both the country competitiveness standpoint, and then move down to the company competitive standpoint, and then I'm going to ask Rebecca, Andre, Sanjeev, and Michelle a series of questions about this, and they're going to give us their insights. We had a really good call on it last night, which I thought might just continue all night directly into the meeting today. And as always with our calls, feel free to jump in at any point during the conversation with your questions or your own comments on the topic. So here we go. We work hard. We get better all the time. Why suddenly do we need innovation? We keep hearing about the country for the future, how we need to move from a Montovna economy to an innovative economy. And the reason for this is that continuous improvement makes incremental changes in the country's competitiveness, and they're short term. And innovation is what brings substantive major changes to the economy, and is what builds lasting competitive advantage. And the real question, and one that we discussed last night, is how much innovation do you need? And that can be, I think, illustrated by the old joke that there is about two campers that are in the forest, and they wake up one morning, come out of their tent, and they see a bear. And one starts running, looks back, and sees that the other is leaning down and putting on shoes and tying the shoes. And he asks, why are you putting on shoes when there's a bear in the campsite? And he said, well, I don't need to run faster than the bear. I need to run faster than you. And that's an example of incremental change, right? So making improvements, tying your shoes, putting on shoes, gives you a momentary advantage over somebody else. But what happens if suddenly there's two bears? And then you have a different situation, and tying your shoes doesn't help you at all. And so really, innovation is very much dependent on the external environment. Some industries are in an environment where there's constant change, external change. They need to innovate more often. Other businesses are in areas where innovation is not as necessary. And so what you need to think about is how you need to innovate more than the environment evolves. And as I said, that's different for different businesses. Sorry, I may have jumped. Is there a big difference between a person who focuses on improvement and a person who wants to innovate? Yes. The difference is a type, but not a degree. And we talked a lot about this last night, and we'll talk more about it this morning. An improvement-oriented person concentrates on practical adjustments, but they can be conservative and change and risk-averse. And I think Rebecca has made a good comment that they're really focused on making now better, doing what happens today easier, more efficient. And an innovative person changes what or challenges what we're trying to do today. They can be impractical, they're more open to risk, and they're about making tomorrow bigger, more profitable, doing things different. They tend to have a longer term vision of what they want to do at the company. So that's a sort of an intro to the topic. And now I would like to ask our panelists to talk a little bit about how company signals how a company signals to the market how they want innovative people. And Rebecca, you talked a little bit about making it clear what the organization wants to do, its purpose, how it judges people, assesses people, and how it rewards people. Could you comment a little bit on that?
Yeah, thanks, Weston. Really happy to. I think if you're in an organization where innovation is kind of fundamental to the success of the organization, so obviously people know that I work for a technology company, and therefore innovation is absolutely in the DNA of the business. You know, research and development is kind of fundamental to success. Then you build that into everything. You make it really clear in the goals of the organization. At Avast, we use OKRs, so they're built into that. When we're looking to recruit people, we're looking for the ability to innovate. Now, not for everybody, but certainly for people who are in roles that are about the growth of the business. We actually assess for that. So in Avast, we call it growth mindset. We're looking for people who've got that kind of growth, growth part of their personality, part of their capabilities. It's really innate to them, and they definitely want to operate in that way. And importantly, we drive our reward system to reward innovation. So by that I mean things like bonuses. Because what we want to do is we want to ensure that innovation, even if people sometimes fail before they succeed, is actually something that people are very much aligned with, definitely want to do, and that we're not going to choke off innovation by either people feeling that they might get criticised if they fail before they succeed, because that's often part of innovation, or that actually people in maintenance mode or incremental improvement mode are the people who get rewarded for kind of delivering kind of safe day-to-day outcomes, when actually for our business to be successful, we do need people to do the things that are a bit more a leap of faith. So that's where a little bit about where we come from. Yeah.
And Andre, you discussed a little bit creating sort of a safe environment or a safe and consistent environment to allow people to innovate. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. Well, I think that most people are capable of innovating. You know, yesterday we actually had a very good discussion about people redecorating their apartments and how radical they can be when they are doing that. And I think that it's not just about let's say the capability of or the capability or the ability to innovate. It's about fear. If you're afraid, you tend to be very conservative. You are risk averse, and you simply are not willing to make big steps. And the problem is that this is highly individual, right? So my fear threshold is somewhere else than somebody else's fear threshold. So if you remove, I would say, unnecessary sources of uncertainty, fear, and doubt, you can enable almost anyone and everyone to innovate.
Thanks. And you talked about the fear factor, and people are talking about obviously the innovative economy, but it takes an innovative workforce to do that. Do you think that people and innovation is greater risk taking, more openness to change? Do you think that people are shifting towards this mindset? Andre, you talked about the fear holding people back. Do you think that fear is taught in the school system, sort of within the culture to have a safe job and to hold that safe job, so not to take risks? And do you think that that's changing?
I think that it's sort of in the Czech DNA. You know, just look at our history as a nation. Last 600 years, we had to be innovative a lot. People were taking huge risks. For example, when you lived at the end of the 19th century, it was unheard of to just take everything you had and move to Austria or Germany or even America. And that is a huge risk, which is again connected to innovation. Not that you moved to America to create new products or services, but you had to reinvent yourself literally, and that is also an innovative process. So I think that it's more about how safe, transparent, reliable is the environment we live in. Literally, if I were the Czech government, I would try to, and I really wanted to have innovative workforce. So to say, I would probably try to create a stable, transparent legislation. Let's say living conditions with predictable cost of living. All these basic fears, all these basic risks are hindering. Really, what hinders people from then having the mental capacity to deliver innovation. Look at Maslow's pyramid. The answer is there.
Thanks, Andre. Sanjeev. Sanjeev is running a restaurant and catering business, which obviously was impacted significantly by COVID. And he's mentioned to us yesterday that it by necessity caused people to embrace innovation and change. Sanjeev, could you comment a little bit on how people are reacting to that? You need to take yourself off mute.
Sorry. I guess it's a kind of hybrid. We were improving around the user experience all the time, and we thought we were innovating till we got to the definition of innovation, which is basically disrupting yourself. So we have done some of those things in the past, but as we got to the period 15 months ago and revenues dropped by 75 or 80%, this is where there was a button that switched, and we had said we need to kind of do things completely differently. So not just innovate what we are producing, but innovate around the business model, innovate around the processes, innovate around fundamentally how we do business. So we are looking at now doing more and more cooperative business with other people working on their strengths and our strengths, and and looking at getting to that mindset of how can we constantly disrupt ourselves, which was never our mindset. So some of the businesses will stay, and the idea for the first time, I think, in last year, we started Fresh and Tasty, which was feeding people in canteens and schools in 2008 as a disruption of our catering business. And in 2020, it showed for the first time that that division did a substantially higher revenue than the catering business. So how are we going to create the business models in the future that are going to disrupt what we are doing today is kind of the space we are groping with, I must admit, and we are trying to find our place and put the systems, but very much agree with what Rebecca and Andre said. The basics, growth mindset, having a clear goals, transparency, and psychological safety. They are fundamental to creating that environment of innovation. And then on the scale on that of what would you call innovation and what would you call improvement, then it's a question of what do you place where. But creating that culture is fundamental to going into the future, I think.
And Sanjeev, sorry to put you on the spot on this. For most of us,
I have been on the spot for 15 minutes, so just go ahead.
Most of us have experienced a much different COVID time than you have, right? I mean, our businesses have been affected to a minor to a significant degree, but not as existentially as your business. And Andre mentioned, and Rebecca also mentioned, sort of that you need to create this psychological safe space. How did you do that? I mean, most of us won't face a situation like this, but we could probably learn lessons from somebody who went through this and was able to create an environment where people were not fearing what was happening, but sort of embracing what was happening and working to save the business.
Yeah, I mean, I would be lying if I said, you know, we have a total handle on this and we were able to do it. You know, this is how we did it. I think there was a lot of Sophie's choice in there. We had to make decisions where, you know, either it was saving the company or saving somebody who'd been with us for 25 years. So but we tried to do it in a fair way. Going forward, but there are also companies that have grown by 80, 100 or more than 100% in the same period when our revenues dropped by 80%. So what we're trying to do now is create future business models where we could probably collaborate with some of those companies and create a kind of a portfolio which evens out you know, things for the future. So innovating around all of those. But listen, the answer to that, how do we create psychological safety? Not an easy one. And we took a lot of decisions. I am not sure all those decisions were right. But at that point in time, given the information we had, we thought they were right, but we tried to take those decisions in as fair a manner as possible and within the scope of you know, like when a plane is going down, you say the mother has to first put on the oxygen before you put it on the 2-year-old baby or the 4-year-old baby. So it was always that decision of, you know, save the company and then we'd be able to save everybody else. And within the scope of that, we tried our best to provide whatever psychological safety we could. So yeah, that's not a simple that this is how we did it and here's the formula. I don't have that.
Yeah. Andre wrote in the chat that this is innovation should happen in teams and not at the C-suite. How much in these decision making that you had to do, which obviously affected everybody on the team in a sort of fundamental way, how did you share the decision? How did you consult with everyone on the team to make them feel like they were part of the change that was happening?
So in our case, we are totally decentralized and totally empowered because in service, you can't run a centralized organization. The interaction is taking place with the customer, and until and unless the person who is actually delivering the interaction is empowered to take charge and make sure it takes care of those needs, it doesn't happen. So in our case, over the last 15 months, what concerns everything that we did from you know, getting our to-go delivery out there in 4 days, et cetera, it was all bottoms up. There was very little, I would not say no idea that came from the C-suite, but very little that came really from the C-suite. It was all bottoms up. It was all from the teams. And that was the balance when we talk about Sophie's choice, to make sure the remaining team, while they are losing some of their colleagues that they are very closely linked to, just like a family that have to go away, that you can keep them in a spirit, that they keep innovating and keep, you know, thinking positively and are not scared of their own jobs, etc. So that was a tough piece to run. And again, I'm sure we didn't take all the right decisions, but I think overall, we came out of it decently. And I think the decisions on the ethical and moral side were always taken on the high ground that we consider to be the base with our values at all times, given the information at that time. So that's kind of, I don't know if it's an appropriate answer, kind of giving you a algorithm or a formula to, you know, that's what the reality was. The couple of things I would point out, we had to let go about from 370 to 150, close to about 60% of our workforce, but not one person left without a, you know, what you call in Czech, a dohoda, Everybody had an agreement to leave, so it was done in a fair way, and with the understanding that one day they would probably want to return.
So thanks, Sanjeev. Christoph had a comment that I think we'll address in a couple slides down the road, if you don't mind, Christoph.
Absolutely. It was just a comment. I didn't want to interrupt the discussion.
So how does a company identify innovative people during the recruiting process? How do you weigh the balance between skill set and personality? Rebecca, you talked a little bit as we were preparing for the meeting about the growth mindset. How do you, what is the growth mindset? I mean, what are the like the criteria or the characteristics of a growth mindset, and how do you identify that in the recruiting process?
No, I mean, I think it's quite interesting. So for us in Avast, we have this idea around growth mindset, and we actually use psychometric testing as one of the methods to understand whether people have this kind of growth mindset. And there are really 3 traits that we're looking for. One is about it's kind of continual focus and energy behind innovation and improvement. The second thing is a complete commitment to development, both of self and of others. And the third is something that's a bit more around kind of innate creativity, the ability to both create and creatively problem solve. So we use psychometric testing, and this is about, for us, trying to maintain what we call the founder's mentality in a mature company. Because if you think back to when Edda and Pavel founded Avast, over 30 years ago, they were founders, they were innovating, in a place that was, we didn't have cybersecurity then. So what we're trying to do is to be more specific and quite focused on how we can capture the energy of what would originally have been the founder's energy, but trying to capture that mentality of innovation and breakthrough thinking, but with people who are joining us now in the organization. So it's quite a kind of an interesting area, and interestingly, people will know that I'm really passionate about diversity. One of the things that we're trying to do at Avast is to make sure that we've got sufficient actual diversity, because actual diversity links to cognitive diversity. So our sense is, if you've got a set of people who all look exactly the same, then the likelihood is that they're going to think in a kind of common way as well. So if you have people from a whole range of backgrounds and preferences from a diversity point of view, you're probably going to get some cognitive diversity as well as physical, if I can call that physical diversity. So there's some of the things that we're looking at.
Thanks, Rebecca. So Christoph, you had a couple of comments on this. Do you want to extrapolate?
The latest one is just for people who maybe haven't heard that much about the growth mindset. So there is an extract and then, of course, Carl Dweck's book. But just generally before, and I'll need to leave, so just what I wanted to share on the C-suite is the piece that we need to, we always say as leaders, oh yes, we absolutely, we support innovation and everything. But I personally witnessed, and I train design thinking in J&J, and I personally witnessed when people came with an idea, and kind of an experiment, and already had features of the idea, the whole leadership reacted by torpedoing basically all the loose ends, right? It's like, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. Instead of saying, what a wonderful idea, guys, let's work on it farther, they basically killed it, and the team was leaving completely disappointed from the presentation and from the meeting. And this is what I meant by us leaders. We say one thing, but how we really behave when we are facing improvements or innovation in real time, that quite often is a different thing. So that was really what my comment was linked to. And the second comment, Rebecca, growth mindset recruitment is a wonderful idea. I love it. Thank you.
So Christoph, I think you hit on something that we call in the office the yes but syndrome.
Exactly.
Where people say yes, but, and then they lay out all the reasons why it can't happen. So how do you build in an organization a resistance to that reaction? It's a defensive reaction, right? It's partly driven by the ego. It's partly driven by the desire not to change. How do you
We are really committed to design thinking, and not only that we train you know, the staff and kind of people interested, but we actually developed a shortened module for leaders, and it is really focused on, you know, you as a leader don't need to know all the ins and outs of design thinking. You need to learn exactly the keywords of I like, I wonder, if you will, you know, one of the kind of phraseology of design thinking, which is exactly find the positives on it, encourage people, you know, allow them to experiment for a very defined period of time, so that you can kill it quickly if it really doesn't, you know, if it's not the right way. And this is what you need to do. So not that you bring design thinking to the bottom of the organization, but you really need to, it's just like a couple sentences the leaders need to learn, and then everything can change.
So thanks, Christoph. So I wanted Sanjeev to comment a little bit, because Sanjeev has to sometimes hire chefs, right? And chefs are a certain personality type. When we think of chefs, we think of creativity, right? But when Sanjeev thinks of a chef, he probably is also thinking, I would like to have that dish prepared the same way several times a day, 7 times a week, using the same portions, and have him be able to organize a kitchen that's able to do that, right? So you're focused both on, he needs to bring something, right? He needs to bring innovation. Innovation is what brings people into the restaurant, but the incremental experience, the incremental improvement experience is what keeps people coming back, right? So how do you hire a chef? How much do you weigh the creativity, and how much do you weigh the ability to execute?
Yes. So, you know, going back to the growth mindset, this is something we have been trying, at least in the last 15 months, to ingrain pretty deeply into our culture. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's not a black and white decision. It's like when you're making a team. You need the defenders and you need the guys who go on offense, and you put them all together. So it's always a combination of the guys who execute and the guys who create and the guys who are hybrids or combinations of those. I mean, in our business, we always used to say, you know, it's 90% about execution. You can have great ideas, but if you're not executing on them, because there are no patents in our business. So whatever we do, if it's totally innovative, and you would probably have a somewhere between a 6-week to a 3-month head start on anybody else, or maybe a 6-month if you're completely out of the box. But at the end of the day, everything is very copyable. So the idea is to bring together teams that are able to innovate, create, and at the same time, you need the execution. So to have that balance.
Thanks, Sanjeev. So Rebecca, I'll bring you back into the conversation. Are there gaps in skill sets or learned character in the market?
Yeah, I definitely think so, and I think this is not just about the Czech education system. I think this is about education systems more broadly, in that they're very focused on teaching students a set of facts or theories, and then testing against those facts, because most examinations are about the repetition of facts or the application of facts that have been taught, which is sort of the opposite of what we need for innovation. Because what we need for innovation is people who have the ability to think laterally, to problem solve for themselves. And in a strange way, in most of our education systems, that's sort of the opposite of what we're asking people to do. We're asking people actually to focus on the facts that they've been taught. So I think that's really interesting. It would take a huge change in education anywhere in the world, I think, to be able to really to kind of put things into reverse, if you like, and to teach people, you know, how to challenge and how to be creative in a different way. But that is something that I see when I see young people coming into the workplace. Often they're coming into the workplace waiting to be told, you know, what do I need to do, or, you know, what are the rules I need to obey, or what are the processes that I need to follow, what are the facts that I need to know, rather than them being able to self-start themselves, because our education system has taught them to operate in a different way. But I think this is quite a big thing that we would need to look at in every society. Actually, it's not peculiar to the Czech Republic.
Thanks. Does anybody else have any comments on skill sets or learned character that needs to change? We'll move on then.
Could I just add a piece on what Rebecca just said? I think I'm a lot more positive on the education system. I think we already have in place, not in all schools, but in some select schools, the discovery method of learning, where you really don't have textbooks. You go out and you discover, and instead of getting the knowledge or the information, which is at the end of your phone anyway, you get to know where to get it and how to build on it, etc. And I think with the kind of very rapid growth of the internet, I am positive that this would, you know, take us into a, how do you say, disruption of the education system a lot faster than would normally have happened with all the bureaucracy. I don't know what you think about that, Rebecca, but I'm positive on the education system, where we have no idea what we should be teaching these kids in 20 or 30 years when they're going to be working. What are they going to be needing? So I guess the only thing we can teach them today is learn how to learn new things.
Yeah.
And how to very quickly unlearn what you have just learned yesterday and learn something else and disrupt yourself. And the other thing we can teach them is how you can have self-confidence doing that and make change as a part of your DNA. Change really being, even in nature, the only constant that is there, and we are just kind of waking up to it. But so that's kind of
no, I agree. I totally agree with you, Sanjeev. I think there has been, you know, some improvements. I think it's to do with proportionality for me. So I think you're right. You know, for teaching young people how to cope with change, how to be resilient, how to self-start, how to problem solve, how to be a self-directed learner, how to actually research things. They're the skills that they need. As my son says to me, "Mum, why did I have to spend so much time learning about volcanoes?" Because, you know, as an example, you know, he was doing geography,
right.
and, you know, it's like, I don't know how that's going to be useful. And I think that's what's really interesting now is actually giving young people the skills that are going to allow them to continually learn and evolve is more important, I think, than the specifics of learning about volcanoes, as an example.
Right.
So we'll move on, if we may, to Rebecca.
Maybe Weston, one more comment from me.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I think this is really important discussion, and I am a relatively recent product of Czech education system, and I don't think it's black and white, because from my experience, you never know when knowing something about volcanoes is going to be useful.
True.
And and I really mean it, because I'm always, you know, my background is IT and computer science and system engineering, and I'm always amazed how powerful the analogies are between let's say computing and, for example, nature,
Yes.
biology. And having at least a glimpse of these things is really very helpful in my job. You know, the Czech education system is modeled largely after the Austrian-Hungarian example, or let's say philosophy, structure, whatever you want to call it. And what I want to say is that I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because originally it was meant to teach people problem solving and critical thinking. This is, by the way, the reason why Latin used to be mandatory in secondary schools, because the point of teaching Latin was not to teach people Latin. The point was to really build the right thinking patterns, because Latin is a very structured, very principle-driven language. This has been replaced by teaching mathematics, and this is why wherever I hear about you know, mathematics is too hard and we need to remove it, and we don't really need a mandatory school leaving exams from mathematics, I find that really scary. And I think that teaching some facts is not a bad thing.
I think we all definitely agree. I think the teaching facts and adding the context. I mean, so you mentioned the volcano. It's good to put to teach the process of the volcano, but then to also teach them the context, so they can make that connection between the natural world and computing, like you did, Andre. Let's move, if we can, to the next slide. How does a company create an innovative mindset? It's one thing to hire people who are innovative, but how do you install that focus towards innovation inside a company? Rebecca, you want to make some comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's about making the innovative mindset something that is obviously kind of critical to the success of the company. So for me, then you have to align all the processes to the company to that mindset. So if you're saying we really want people to be innovative, then you need to recruit for innovation. You need to develop people so that they can become more innovative or use different innovative practices. You need to reward for it. You need to celebrate it. And I think the point earlier was about within your leadership and management structure, you need to have people that they might not be innovative themselves. I mean, it doesn't come naturally to everybody, but as a minimum, they need to be able to allow innovative people to flourish within the organization and not get sort of restricted by the organization. So I think that leadership point is crucial, because I think you know, you tend to see people in leadership and managerial positions who are a bit later in their career because they've progressed to that point. So they might not have been people who've been familiar with these practices themselves, and they sort of need to relearn themselves how to manage people who are maybe have a kind of slightly different way of working because their bias is towards innovation.
Thanks. Any other comments, Andre, Sanjeev?
I was just smiling because I was thinking of myself while Rebecca was talking. And in as much as I've always been driving innovation on the one end, on the other end, I guess, you know, some of those areas of encouraging it and having those people grow. And I look back and I say, what, you know, maybe I was not doing the best job there. So again, you know, time and opportunity to learn and grow into the next space.
Rebecca, could I ask just one follow-up question on this, which is how do you build into the system the rewards for innovative behavior? I mean,
yeah, so in my company, we have people who are working towards OKRs. We use OKRs as opposed to objectives. It doesn't really matter what it is. And so I think the critical thing here is that the OKRs are allowing people to set themselves objectives and key results that they're working towards, but that we are rewarding progress to those objectives rather than success, because I think the key here is that you might, so in my organization, they might be trying to design a new piece of technology. In designing that, they might fail 20 times and succeed the 21st time. So your reward system needs to be able to reward that failure as it is a mechanism by which you get to success, which is the opposite to some other reward systems. So if you think about the classic, I don't know, sales commission, for example, you win the piece of business, you get the money. Actually, what we've needed to do is to set up a reward system that can reward the effort, the progress, if you like, rather than the outcome. Otherwise, you're going to just choke off innovation. Because people will say, well, there's no point in me taking a big risk. I might as well just do something that's really, you know, an incremental improvement, because that's what's going to get me my bonus or my recognition.
thanks, Rebecca. So one of the things we spent a lot of time on in preparation for this session was the mix, right? You need to have the innovators. You also need to have the incremental improvers. Do you separate the two, or do you combine them? Andre, you talked a lot about the incremental approach and the innovative approach to the business. How do you deal with your innovators? How do you deal with your improvers?
Well, I think that this was in the discussion yesterday, or in the previous preparations. Sanjeev asked a very interesting question. I think that everybody asks that. How do you know that you are, quote unquote, just improving, or that you are innovating?
Yeah.
And I think, in my opinion, I'm not really sure it even matters. I think that when it comes to the ability to deliver improvements, someone's innovation is somebody else's incremental step. So I think that it's really up to it's best if you just leave it on the individual teams. What if what is the pace they feel comfortable with, and then you just show them where you need to get what is the ultimate result, and use the approach which Rebecca was describing. Reward the behavior as much as the result.
Rebecca, you talked a little bit about agile squads. Could you explain what they are and how they work?
Yeah, so when we've got either a problem that we're trying to solve, or a piece of innovation that we're working on, or maybe a new product that we're trying to develop, we'll set up agile squads. So these are groups of people who we pull together based on their capabilities and talents. It's regardless of where they are in the organization and regardless of hierarchy, so that we just got the right people together. And they then work as a team. We call them an agile squad because they're working in an agile way. So we work on a sprint model, whereby they're working together for a defined period of time. Let's say it's 12 weeks. And then they're working in sprints within those 12 weeks. So that 12 weeks will be divided into 6 times 2 weeks, when they're trying to rapidly do things to innovate in that period. And at the end of the first 2 weeks, they'll say, okay, what have we learned? We need to do it slightly differently, and go and try that, and go and try that, and go and try that. So it's very much about moving quickly, working as a team to kind of really generate collaborative ideas and problem solving, and then positively doing a piece of work, testing, learning, working out is it good enough? Do we need to do things differently? And then moving on and then moving on. So even though we might have several sprints of failure, that's fine in order to get to the right answer. And these are self-directed teams, so they're working in a collaborative way as a team, so not with a kind of team manager. They're working collectively, and they're constantly giving one another feedback about improvement in a constructive way. So that's about, okay, what if we did this? What if we did that? Could you do that? Could you do that? So that rapidly things can kind of move and change. So that's just, that's something that we work. Of course, we don't have these agile squads working across the whole organization. So if I think about something like payroll that I look after, I don't have an agile squad in payroll, but in our development areas, our innovation areas, we find that this works quite well for us.
Thank you. Andre, Sanjeev, any final comments on mixing teams, matching teams?
Just curiosity, Rebecca, how many agile squads would you have at any point in time working on different problems?
Oh, loads. Yeah, loads. So an agile squad could be like 4 or 6 people, or it could be, we've got one at the moment that's working on particularly something quite big, which probably got about 50 people in it, and then they've got sub squads within the overall squad, if you like. So it just depends. It could be something very, very simple for like a 6-week period, or it could be something that's much more complex that could take a year. Yeah. But many is the short answer.
We'll advance forward. So innovators strive for big jumps, and big jumps obviously disrupt, and disruption can disrupt obviously consistency, right? So how do you organize the business so you're not disrupting it in non-productive ways? And there's 2 approaches to this, I think, that we came up with last night. Rebecca, I will start with you, and then Andre, you can follow.
Yeah, so my kind of point here is that in a way, the big innovation should disrupt the whole of the organization, because you can't be in a situation, for example, where you create a new product, but then the sales team doesn't change and the customer service team doesn't change, because they're going to need to be able to sell the product differently and to be able to serve the customer differently. So I would make the argument that actually when you're making a pivot or a big innovation in an organization, everybody has to change, because actually you need to be aligned with where the organization is going. And I'm talking about big changes here that are kind of affecting the fundamental innovation of the organization. I actually think people don't mind change generally, because we all make changes in our personal lives all the time. But I do think that at work, where the change is not necessarily your choice. So if for example, in my organization, if my engineering team decide to create a new product, and that means for my HR team, oh no, we've got to train people in a completely different way, that isn't our choice. You know, the engineering team is saying, we've created this new product, we need a different training course now to make sure that everybody can align with it. We have to create the training course to respond to our engineering colleagues. And for me, I think that's often the problem with change. It's not that people can't change, is that when it's imposed on them, they have to change. They're a bit more resistant. So for me, that's where helping people in companies to understand and work through the psychological transitions that are needed when a change is required or imposed, that's where we need to put the energy. I think that's a real misconception that we have sometimes, is that we need to manage change because people don't change or they resist change. I don't think they do. I think when it's an imposed change, then they need time to manage the transition, actually. And we're doing quite a lot of work on this at the moment, so it's a bit of a hot topic for me.
Thanks, Rebecca. And Andre, you talked yesterday about splitting from the way that you approach things from the core business and new revenue streams. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the disruption is a risk which needs to be managed. It can't be, or it shouldn't be prevented, well, going back to your joke about the two guys and the bear, but it should be managed. And the risk is not about, let's say, not just about uncertainty, it's also about focus. Yeah, focus is the word I was looking for. So proper innovation, proper disruption needs focus as much as day-to-day operation. So the way how we handle this is that we usually split these activities into programs. Under these programs, we actually have a very similar structure to the agile squads, which Rebecca was talking about. We just use different names and different agile rituals, but the principles are the same. But what we do is that we have, for example, a core business program at Ysoft, which is about really protecting and growing our core business. Our market where we operate in is very conservative and is not, I would say, always ready to be disrupted. So this is where really we deliver more like a smaller incremental improvements. And people understand that this is what is expected by our customers and our business partners, and this is what we focus on. But at the same time, we are trying to reinvent Ysoft as an organization, and we have a different program for that with different teams and different resources, which is about opening new revenue streams. Well, this disruption innovation is not. It's not an objective, right? It's a process. The objective really is to grow business, to open up new opportunities, to open up new revenue streams. So under the label of opening new revenue streams, this is where we are. This is where we are focusing on making more radical changes. Coming up with new product, services, processes, new business models.
Thanks, Andre. Michel Perret, who runs the Carrier refrigeration business in the country. So he's responsible for production lines, and production lines are full of innovation, but they're not known for being innovative, right? They're known for being able to repeat the same thing over and over to create the same result. So Michel, I had the question of how you introduce innovation in a production environment.
Well, Weston, the right phase to introduce innovation on the production line is definitely during the product development cycle. I think 80% of the quality of the product, productivity, target costing of any new product is embedded into the design. So what we are trying to do is definitely to involve as many stakeholders in the design phase to ensure we capture any innovation with a new product. By stakeholder, I mean suppliers, as well as operators, as well as, so it goes beyond R&D and engineering. And then the remaining after the launch of a product, what we do on the production line is basically 20%. We know that 20% of improvement in terms of cost, productivity, quality will occur through an improvement process. So obviously, we're trying again to capture idea from stakeholder, supplier, and operator. But it means that if you really want to go to drastic change in your productivity or your quality or your cost, you have to start again to a redesign process. I wanted to expand a little bit on the innovation within a large corporation. I may take two significant examples. One of them is Hewlett-Packard in the end of the 80s and early 90s. First of all, they had a slogan they launched into a large corporation at that time, which is no risk, no fun. Because Packard and Hewlett were clearly thinking that the large corporation was stalled in their processes with lack of innovation and so on. And sometimes that leads to significant changes. To embed some innovation, they were, I mean, like the laser printing technology, they were the leader, and they're still the leader for that technology. They have to create a special division outside of the headquarters. It was Boise in Idaho. And they really developed that technology with a specific team, which is Agile's team, which is the team squad. And they've been successful, and to the point that that company printer was a bigger part of the revenue 5 or 10 years after. And then, and then you have Toyota. I mean, if you think about Toyota in terms of innovation, they were in the 90s. They were the first one to develop what we call the hybrid technology, which is a mix of fuel engine car as well as with a battery-driven car. And it was a major innovation at that time, at a time that price oil was very low, and they brought the innovation to the market. So, but they have a spatial allocation of resource and money. I think one thing that is missing in the discussion, we talk about leadership, we talk about agile team and so on, but I think the company has to allocate resource and money to any innovation, with the understanding that 9 out of 10 innovation change might fail.
Thanks, Michel. We're going to advance on to the last slide, and then we can have a chance for more discussion. I know some of you have a hard stop at 10 o'clock, so those of you who have to go, please do. Otherwise, we can extend it for the others for another 5, 10, 15 minutes, as long as there's a good discussion. So the last one is feedback for the AmCham. And how we can approach the government so that they can innovate government policy to develop more innovative people. Andre, you had a comment at the beginning on the creating a stable environment. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
I think that it really needs to start with removing uncertainty and increasing transparency. I would say predictability for people. If you are not afraid of changes in I would say, or unpredictable changes in legislation, if you can rely on the integrity of the business environment in the Czech Republic, if you are not afraid of failing, maybe as a business founder or entrepreneur, I don't really like that word. It applies generally to business owners. Then you are more willing to innovate and take risks. So any steps in that direction. I think that many people just don't realize how important or how interconnected, for example, the level of corruption in the society is connected with the ability of the business environment to deliver innovation. Any improvements in this area, which our government, our country can deliver, would have a long-lasting positive impact.
Thanks, Andre, and thanks for spending the time with us. I know you need to leave at 10, so you'll probably need to jump off in the next few minutes. I'm going to move on to Rebecca, because Rebecca talked a little bit about the education system and what needs to change. Rebecca, just remind us.
Yeah, I think it's a question of degree of proportionality. So I think probably the combination of traditional education and more innovative education is going to need to get kind of reversed, so that it's more innovation and less of the traditional elements. I think the other thing is where we have larger organizations who bring a lot of young people into the workplace, we need to work out how we support them in their early careers to help them to consolidate and actually gain their confidence in innovation in their early careers. That's something that I think is quite important for the bigger corporations who have more structured programs for young people. We need to kind of reinforce that innovation mindset.
And how much are you, supplanting, supplementing the education system that your workforce has with your own internal training programs? Do you feel like you're re-educating people, or you're just supplementing people?
I think it's a bit of both, because I'm recruiting globally, so it's quite a mixed picture.
Okay, thanks very much. So, Sanjeev, Michelle, any further comments? Rebecca?
I think in two spaces. The first one, when we look at a world where you need to constantly disrupt yourself, irrespective of what you do with the education system, unless the mindset changes. So, even if you're able to supplement the education system or do your own training program, unless you're willing to change that again, and retrain your people again, and constantly have that as a base. And the other one is in terms of the government, when you spoke about, and the resources that are put there. I think some of the fundamental changes in education can be taken there, but I think there is a lot of work that government can do by putting resources behind the private sector. And I'm talking about the small entrepreneurs, and and all of those things where you say, all right, we become the precursors or the catalysts for driving innovation into the market. And there is a reward system, just like you would have like in a private company, say, all right, the processes are rewarded, the successes are rewarded, the speed to market is rewarded, the speed to et cetera, et cetera. So I think on the education side and on the being kind of a catalyst for innovation, the government can play systematically some of those in some of those areas.
Thanks, Sanjeev. Any further comments, questions from people?
I would just add a small, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would just add a small piece on the change that Rebecca talked about. And I think the fact of the matter is that we all change every single moment of every day. We are not the same that we were yesterday. We are different today. It's just the mindset, which is the growth mindset or the innovation mindset, which how do we perceive that change? And our environment changes and we project change, but how is the perception of that change, and how can we kind of manage the speed of change within the, so to say that people don't like to change at work, I think it's just a mindset. It's a kind of a thought, which is a fixed mindset thought, as opposed to a growth mindset thought. So just that thought process, if it fundamentally shifts to, the fact we are changing every day, and some people more and some people less, is just recognizing that and moving with it. Sorry. So that's
very good. Very good. So thanks, Sanjeev. Thanks, Michelle. Anybody else with any comments before we cut off for today? I'm not hearing anything or seeing anything. So that will conclude today's session. I appreciate all of you joining. Just to remind you that tomorrow we're having the official General Assembly, where we'll be talking about key economic indicators that will shape the recovery. And then on Thursday, we have a session with the Prime Minister talking about what the government is going to do both for the innovation economy and the recovery. So you should have received invites for both. Hope you can join us then. We will be continuing the conversation about the innovative workforce. I think it's the most essential thing that is facing the country in the coming years. I appreciate all of you for participating this morning. I appreciate Rebecca and Andre and Michelle and Sanjeev for their comments, and hope to see you guys either this week or at some point over the summer. Have a good day.